like to welcome you to another talk by Rickety Bill. I just love geography. And some people ask me a lot about, what in the world is geography? Well, it's kind of the stage for events. A psychologist would look at individuals, a sociologist would groups of people. History would be act one, act two, act three. But geography is the stage itself, the setting, the locational context, the spatial context, how far things are apart, and whether it is a topography. What's the weather? Geography is really the earth landscape and how it works with the human landscape. Now, over the years, I've taught geography so many times and I've enjoyed it so much. I was really lucky to start in middle school and teaching geography to Hammond Clark seventh graders. That was fun. And I got promoted, big time promoted, to Illinois State University, where I taught a variety of classes like Earth and Sky. Well, Earth and Sky was like kind of geology and astronomy, but we tried to make sure that the human aspect was taken into consideration, the history of different cultures and how they worked with the earth, and basically how it affected the human landscape. And meteorology certainly does, with its tornadoes and its hurricanes, and basically it's part of the astronomical low atmosphere. And we look at the cloud patterns, and as we go higher into the stratosphere and ionosphere, the magnetosphere, and on out. This little blue planet that we have is really quite a spectacle in outer space, and we better be pretty glad that it has the kind of environment that it does. And the geographers study that environment and the interactions. Okay, so I go over to Illinois State University and teach that one class, but I also taught a class in maps for teachers. Maps for teachers means, okay, geographers, let's have the teachers use more maps. And we also talked about how maps can distort things. When they, even advertisers sometimes will put things closer than they should be or make things larger. It was just really fascinating to look at those kinds of approaches to mapping as well. And then I taught a class in cultural geography, where the different cultures are on the landscape, and they look at it differently through their indigenous point of view. Maybe they have a different religion or a different language. All of that became part of the cultural landscape. And we would take a look at that, and very well we would be looking at population growth, and we would be looking at all sorts of interactions and the building of the infrastructure and how it fit with the people. So that's cultural geography, languages and religions and taboos and you name it, how the culture works with the environment. When we look at geography, the physical geography comes up quite often, and I taught that. And physical geography is really like earth science, but we spend a lot more time talking about the human impact on the topography or on the roads, or maybe the draining of the wetlands, or how the oceans and the ocean tides affect things. So we take a good look at that. And always we focus on location and spatial context and where things are. That makes a big difference to add that to our equation. The other class that I taught was a class in conservation of natural resources. Not only are we running out of scarce minerals and scarce resources, but we're mistreating some of them. And really, as we mistreat, we create lots of waste. The waste itself, builds up even pollution, and our bloodstream has some of the toxins. When I was in Africa, Rickety Bill went to Africa, how about that? And when I was in Africa, I saw some yellow streams and yellow lakes from mining waste. And that was just a shock to me, that there would be that kind of mistreatment of beautiful waters, animals in the environment, the poaching and the hunting and so forth that is done illegally. It takes so many of our creatures, and if we understood each ecosystem very carefully, we could respect animals and make sure that, in some cases, the hunters reduce the population to the right amount. On the other hand, perhaps there's a certain kind of animal that maybe is considered a pest, but you take it out and you have another problem then that arises. Even you think about possums having several thousand ticks for a meal. It doesn't sound very attractive, does it? But that's working with the wildlife, and that's what we do in conservation. I've even had wolves brought into class, my conservation classes, as a demonstration. So, Rickety Billy likes animals, and it's part of geography because it's really part of what we work with the natural landscape and the natural creatures that are here sharing everything with us. Now, over time, I went back to IU to work on my doctorate, and I was specializing in urban geography and conservation in Africa. But I got hired by Butler University, was there for 11 years. And I taught so many different classes, I don't think they knew what to expect next. Human geography, cultural geography, political geography. Now, what in the world is political geography? Well, the geographer talks about and works with research about how to share an international river, or a border that borders multiple countries, or a whole watershed that has to be shared for the scarce resource of water supply, or a territorial sea. Or we even have countries inside countries. Lesotho and Swaziland are separate countries inside of South Africa. We look at that. We might look at the size of the countries. Now, what discipline talks about sizes of countries besides geography? Don't you know that Russia, with its huge size, or Brazil, Australia, America, the United States, really has a size advantage in terms of resources, but then it causes transportation problems or communication problems across the entire development of those giant sizes. And then you have the little bitty countries that everybody misses on their map quiz. And Africa, for example, changed a lot of names after colonialization. And I still have trouble figuring out what it's named now. So the courses at Butler included things like political geography, but also urban geography. Now, urban geography was the infrastructure, the planning, how the city developed and where it could annex property, where were the city parks going to be that would be convenient, making sure the big box stores were fairly close to the consumers. The high-rise apartments didn't kind of get in the way of all the other development. And there was a continuity, a context, a locational context that geographers talk about and treasure. And that helped me a great deal in my future planning career, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. I taught other classes at Butler, including a class for seniors. I thought that we would have about 5 or 6 seniors taking the class, working on projects. I couldn't believe it when 24 students signed up. But we had some amazing projects where students left Indianapolis after detailing the geography and geographical issues and locational issues of Appalachian poor in Indianapolis, and then actually living in Appalachia for a while, and then reporting on this to the rest of the class, looking at pollution levels and what it might do to certain species of fish or aquatic animals. We also had there's two students that went all the way from Butler University area all the way to the Mississippi, and then on to New Orleans. I got in trouble, with the other professors by having my students gone for 22 days. But they learned a lot and they shared a lot, and it was one of the very best classes that I've ever had. Now, many other classes I taught at Butler included the geography of North America, kind of speaks for itself, and we look at everything North American, and we don't touch South America at all. you know, okay, maybe with migration, we might talk about the in-migration, but you can imagine we look at the physical geography of North America, the transportation systems, the languages and our dialects, the ethnicity differences, the racial differences, population growth, population density, over density, under density, you name it, and even political issues. So there's been some interesting programs on how did the states get their shape. They got it for political reasons and geographical reasons only. Along a river. You take Indiana, for example, and it's got longitudes that form the eastern and western boundary. It's got part of Lake Michigan forming the northern boundary, and it's got the Great Ohio River forming the southern boundary. That's all pure geography, for gosh sakes. And I just love teaching at Butler. The students are very receptive, and I taught many different classes there, and it was just fascinating. And I had a lot of very gifted students. Many went on to master's degrees, which I really appreciated. One thing is kind of interesting. Here's Mr. Land, my last name. My name's not just Rickety Bill only. Teacher geography. And wouldn't you know it, one of my students went down to University of Kentucky and started studying for a master's degree from Dr. Mountain. Well, I had students, I had other professors that I knew quite well, Professor Bush and Professor Forrest and Professor Frost. So we're all geographers, and it's, I think there was a calling there. That somehow when we got our given names, there must have been an angel there giving out geographical names for future careers or something like that. Now, old Rickety Bill was at Butler for 11 years, which was a wonderful experience, my best employment ever. And then I went on to other universities. I spent some time as a year at Illinois State. I taught African geography after my trip to Africa for DePauw University in Greencastle, a wonderful class. And I could use all my slides that I took from my Africa tour because the tour was for professors. And we went from university to university to university, but we also went to some of the magical natural resources and some of the villages and developed cities throughout Africa. So that was something I could share with about 25 students at DePauw. Now, other places where I've taught include Illinois, not only Illinois State, but Indiana State at Terre Haute. And Indiana State, I taught several classes, mostly human geography, cultural geography, and physical geography. I also taught for 18 years, part-time, at IUPUI in Indianapolis, and I taught another class, a different class. This one was weather and man, meteorology. Rickety Bill had taught about winds and rain and strange things like that, and I guess I had to explain, why sometimes it rains frogs, and that was always interesting, and I made sure that I wanted to inculcate the love of learning. That was the main thing. The love of learning to me was essential, and I looked at context, I looked at cycles, I looked at patterns, I looked at associations of different kinds, and I didn't look at just facts. I kind of worked on the structure behind all geographical events and geographical points of view. and that was more for the advanced students. But oh, the young freshmen and sophomores, they eventually got the plan too, and yes, they had some facts on their exams, but it wasn't so much factual as it was creative in terms of looking at perspectives. Like, for example, perceptual geography. What in the world's perceptual geography? It's sort of like the imaginary landscape that you perceive out there. So the question is, what's real? Do you always see the power plant when you go by? Maybe some people don't even know it's there. They leave it off their map even though it's the biggest thing around. Or the power substation, things like that, or they just miss it. You have a whole row of mailboxes that are not seen, or telephone poles that are not seen until they're taken down and the wire's buried under the ground, and then they comment about it. So the patterns and things out there in the landscape can be distorted. I did some interesting research and found out that the idea of interacting and owning or relating to a piece of property was very large if you lived near a highway. I mean, it would be out several square miles even. If you went back further in the neighborhood, it got smaller. In the core of the neighborhood, it was just a neighborhood. Now, I applied this same research to some inmates at the prison, and they, once they were incarcerated, were thinking large area, and as they were stayed in the prison longer, it's got smaller and smaller they only related to the prison, and that's all they talked about in their questionnaire. And lo and behold, after they've been there 6 years, they related to their cell block. And about 10 years, they related to their cell. And about 20 years, they related to the corner of their cell. So they collapsed their spatial area. And you kind of wonder, when people are kind of agoraphobic or they don't travel very much, how they collapse space. Or if they travel a lot, how they expand space. And what are we talking about? We're talking about the use of space. It's a spatial subject, geography. So it's a really fascinating subject. Now, urban planning is something that dovetails with geography really well. And that was my second career. Now, I still was teaching night classes in geography. I seemed to want to teach it night, day, noon, weekends, holidays, anytime I got a chance to have somebody listen to old Rickety Bill. Rickety Bill loves to talk. And he had a whole audience that was glued to their chair, to their notebook, and to their exam that they could do well on if they came to class every day. And I kind of made them do that by secret methods. Now, the real reality of urban planning is that we want to have an environment which works, which is attractive, which doesn't alter the human scale. It doesn't seem to have buildings that. Well, let me tell you a story about that. I had a person that was suggesting a development, and they said, we want to get a variance in our planning to build the building at the edge of the sidewalk, and we want to build it the tallest building in the city. And you can almost imagine the feeling as you walked underneath that it was going to, start pelting you with its debris field from someplace on that building. It would just be not at human scale, and even at vertical, it would be kind of terrifying to walk past that building. It would make your energy feel different. Have you ever gone down an alley that was too narrow? That's urban planning, to make sure they're wide enough and accessible enough. Have you ever gone to parking spaces where there's not nearly enough? Or a place that had some beautiful trees that were all cut down and they could have been preserved? So the urban planner does all this. And what is this? This is locational context. This is taking care of the landscape. What landscape? Natural and human. They both exist and they both interrelate. Now, my urban planning career started at Bloomington as a senior planner, and I worked with the comprehensive plan, creating a major survey that helped the plan greatly be accepted. I was the chair of multiple committees and stakeholder committees. I wrote part of the comprehensive plan on population dynamics and on the environment. Here comes the geography again. Hello. And I was given not an award, but a good mention in the plan itself as a very important person that helped steer the plan to being not hotly debated, which most plans are, but really quite accepted. And I had all the neighborhoods represented. That sounds very geographical, doesn't it? To have all the spread of the human beings in their clusters of families at the table. You know, this is something I really believe in politically, that we over concentrate certain groups. And if we spread it out to different, not just the stakeholders that have money in the money on the table, but people who have lives on the table, you know, and dreams on the table. That's what to me is important. And the mayor of Bloomington often would send me out to the neighborhoods because neighborhoods used to be kind of hard to talk to, but I talked their language. I tried to flex. And being a geographer and always interested in the environment and people's lives and trying to look at everybody as powerfully wonderful and not have a bunch of negativity, you know, trailing along like a shadow. This really allowed me a lot of kitchen table meetings. And when we had a planning crisis, which I would identify as when we had everybody from all the neighborhoods show up at once, and we couldn't get them in the room to give us their opinion on a case, I would go out early, real early, and discuss several meetings of how the plan for that change could be worked into their point of view and their story and their hopes and their dreams. So we would modify, I'd go back to the developer and modify their plan to a degree. At least I would be factual through the whole time. You wouldn't believe it. So many times when you start a project, the people out there in the hinterland, they begin to believe it's all sorts of things. Now, you might want to develop like 6 lots of middle class, upper middle class housing, well done, you know, trees saved and everything else. And the people in the neighborhood think it's going to be a boys' school or a detention center for soldiers that are gone to AWOL. Every rumor in the book comes out, you know, and I had to convince them that we're not, you know, breeding poisonous snakes back there. That we're going to do something different that would actually be nice for the area and help home values to a degree. The reality is home values really are not marketed so much on specific geography unless, or urban planning, unless there's a real disaster. I've been asked, well, why just get rid of urban planning? And my answer was, okay, let's do that. But do you really want a large junkyard, you know, adjacent to your property? No. Do you want different houses blocking the view of traffic? No. Do you want a whole neighborhood with no access to walking parks or trees or green space? No. Well, eventually I got so many no's, I said, maybe we need a planner. Maybe we need a planning department. And a properly planned community can really look pretty impressive. Now, I'm responsible for some of Bloomington's planning beyond the comprehensive plan. You have to realize that one project was going to change the landscape tremendously. Here we go with geography, changing the landscape, hello. And in this case, it was verticality. They were going to take the very tallest building in Bloomington, no more than 7 stories, and most buildings were about 2 or 3 stories, and build an 11-story monster. I shouldn't say monster. I'm sorry. I don't want to offend anybody, but it was probably called that at one time or another by the neighbors. Well, how in the world Rickety Bill thought of this, I have no idea. But we did computer studies of the shade that 11-story building would cast over all the neighborhoods. And this dark shadow, kind of a creepy dark shadow, would come across their lives. And about 500 people would be disturbed by it. And nobody has ever thought about being disturbed by shade. That'd be, you get disturbed by noise or maybe somebody painting their house pink and blue all over, but shade, that's something new. So that development, I was successful in actually helping to nix that development because of the height of the building and what it would do to the context of the entire city, which is the geography. How do things fit together? What's human scale? Human scale, human scale, human scale is a lot like location, location, location. Geographers look at patterns. They look at context. And this is what the urban planner looks for as well. Now, I went from Bloomington to good old Brown County. And Brown County planning is not the most special thing. People love their freedom. And I've lived in Brown County quite a bit. And I love my freedom, too. I'm right there with you. So when I approached all the planning cases in Brown County, I worked for solutions. I worked for common sense. I went out in the field and changed things or helped people change things. I used what I call options method, of where my options were maybe 5 different options of what they could do with their property. And almost every person walked in with the wrong option. So by the time we talked over all the other options, they saw more profitability, less cost in development or in building. They saw benefits from another point of view. And I was professional enough to give them choices. And when they didn't even need to come to the board. They just could build it just like I said, because it fit with the code too. So I reduced the caseload tremendously. We went from about 140 cases a year down to about 67 cases a year the very first year. Just shattered the numbers, which is what I was asked to do. Now, Brown County is a wonderful place and very special. And I was even asked to write the plan for Nashville. And it went through like magic. Nothing goes through Brown County like magic. So what happened? Well, I went out and met with a lot of people individually. The stakeholders, or not just the people with money, but the people who had dreams and points of view about what could be developed. And I was asked the question, why would you restrict some development in the main part of Nashville? I said, we're restricting it for extreme development, like 7-story glass building, for goodness sakes. And everybody would be upset with that, we think. And we don't want that. And basically, the community character now I'm talking about the character of the community, the way it looks and the way it feels, not just the characters that live there, in this case. And Brown County is known for both. But the beautiful parts of Brown County, I did everything possible to make sure there wasn't a negative impact on those parts. And there was always good access to emergency vehicles and things like that. And I helped design multiple subdivisions, which made more common sense. And maybe it didn't help the landholder maximize the property, but it came close enough to make the numbers work. But the main thing it made the future work. And I was very proud of the work we did in Brown County. And really, the comprehensive plan was rewritten and passed unanimously. That's unheard of. And the zoning ordinance was rewritten by myself. And I added to it and added to it and added to it. Why did I add to it or change it? because some of the restrictions were too restrictive. And I was a little bit of a person that didn't want the authority overwhelming a long-term history and point of view. So it's very simple that I got along with the people. I was Brown County to the soul, and that made a big difference. But my geography background helped a great deal too. The human landscape, the natural landscape, and how it fit together, worked together. The last planning job I had, well, I had a little planning job before that as director of all the planning at Ellisville, and helped to bury the big power lines that they were going to go through by the major highway it was going through. I expanded, or I actually reduced the number of lanes, and then had a pedestrian sidewalk, pedestrian lighting, pedestrian green space instead of fast cars right in the middle of town. There was nobody championing those changes that had the authority to make a difference than I did at that time for Ellisville. While I was working at Ellisville, I got a directorship at Huntingburg. Huntingburg is a city of 8,500 people, very German influence, very neat and clean. And one thing unusual about Huntingburg is very few people showed up at the planning meetings because the council and the mayor and the planning director had been pretty strong and pretty straightforward with common sense planning. So I walked into a situation that wasn't quite as much in turmoil as Brown County was. The situation at Huntingburg still needed some small corrections. They had several big chunks of property that belonged in the rural area. I mean, was like jurisdiction of the rural area, still inside the city boundaries. So they had islands of difference. That's what you annex. You don't necessarily annex way out into no man's land. You annex what is right in the center of your developed areas, so you can do adaptive reuse. You can do some saving big trees and trying really to be careful with how you develop very important natural pieces. So Huntingburg worked out real well. I was given a lot of credit. I had a good intern, and we did the history of 4th Street, which is a commercial, and we did it what it looked like 100 years ago and what it looked like now, and it looks like one is a ghost of the other, and they're still all there. So we documented everything like that and put that puppy right on the United States. Get this, United States, not the Indiana, but the United States Register of Historic Places. And there's only 6 in the state right now that are historic enough to be on that national register. So that took a lot of work, and I was very proud of it. I was given a number of roles in Huntingburg. I was chair of several committees, economic development, for example. I was president of the Chamber of Commerce. How about that? Oh, Rickety Bill was president of the Chamber of Commerce. And what did I do? Not much. No, I did a little bit. But I did it with my geography background and my planning background. And we had a major planning conference there where we taught all of the different officials of the city and other cities about urban planning. Purdue University sponsored it. And we had several important planners there from around the state, and I gave a presentation. So that worked out real well. And then I thought that selling your produce, your home produce, your garden stuff from back of a pickup truck, just a couple every weekend, was not enough. So old Bill, Rickety Bill, we were like, we did a farmer's market. I had 30 vendors when I left there. And because of my work at Ellisville and Huntingburg, I was nominated and won. Cole won the award as the top first place, the champion practicing planner for the entire state, and about 1,000 planners. So that was quite an honor, and it had a lot to do with the fact that most of my changes of zoning ordinance and comprehensive planning didn't take much debate. It was so well fine-tuned, and it wouldn't have been fine-tuned without my geography experience. So I give geography and all the threads and cords back to geography a lot of credit for giving me the academics I needed to be a better planner, including a nationally certified planner. Now, a national certified planner is not easy. You got to be an urban planner for 2 years, have a master's degree, and then take a test that only 40% of the people pass. Well, I passed with flying colors, or at least colors. Maybe the flag was half staff, I don't know. But the thing is that old Bill was made up for any sort of high-level Harvard degree in planning by being certified, and the planning directors around the whole country had that. I went to a number of the national conventions, and if I had a planning issue, I'd call some of these other planning directors from big cities and get advice. So I had a whole team of experts that could help me. And I had a whole tool bag. My geography tool bag and my networking tool bag was very important to me. So that's kind of the story of Rickety Bill and these two careers that kind of wedge and work together, and they go with each other, and one helps the other, and the other helps the back and forth. And to be a good geographer, you've got to know something about urban systems, urban planning, annexation, impacts of like high-speed rail, and you name it, interstate highways impacts, because they link our cities. You got to know this, and you got to know that. So it works actually both ways. Urban planning helps geographers, not just with urban geography, but with human geography, cultural geography, other geographies. But it definitely helps the urban planner to have a geography background. So thanks a lot for watching this this little video of, once again, Rickety Bill's experiences in the world, at least the world he thinks is out there. Thank you.